thick silence pressed down upon the land, suffocating, endless. Eldritch awoke, his body cold yet unfamiliar. He lay still for a moment, his mind struggling to grasp the new reality unfolding before him. The air was heavy, tainted with something ancient and unholy. Slowly he sat up, his fingers sinking into the ground beneath him. It was not earth. It pulsed as if it were alive, the surface slick with crimson. Blood. The land itself fed on it, drank it, thrived upon it. As far as his eyes could see, the horizon was endless and desolate, painted in shades of deep black and dying red. The sky overhead held no stars, no moon, only shifting clouds that churned like liquid shadow. Eldritch exhaled slowly, his breath shaky, not from exhaustion, but from something else, something he had not felt in centuries. Weakness. He looked down at his hands. They were unfamiliar, smooth, untouched by decay or the curse of undeath. Gone were the long withered fingers of a vampire elder. In their place were the hands of a man, young, strong, yet human. His heart pounded. He had a heartbeat. With trembling fingers, he touched his face. No scars, no withered flesh. His skin was firm, untouched by the centuries. He ran his fingers through his hair, thick and full, no longer the brittle strands of an ancient being. His breath hitched. He tried to move through the shadows, to disappear into them as he had done for so long. But nothing happened. No flicker of power, no shift into the void. He reached for something, anything, but the well of darkness he had drawn upon for centuries was gone. He was human again. Eldritch clenched his fists, trying to steady himself as a wave of unease crashed over him. It wasn't fear, not in the way mortals felt fear. It was something deeper, more primal. He knew where he was. This was Nocturna's domain, the afterlife of all elders, the inevitable end that so many had convinced themselves was myth. For all their arrogance, for all their claims of eternity, they were nothing but fleeting sparks in the endless cycle. And now he was here, in the heart of the abyss, where all elders came to serve the vampire god. Eldritch took a slow step forward, his boots sinking slightly into the blood-soaked earth. He did not know where he was going. There were no landmarks, no structures, only the endless horizon of black and crimson. But he walked, because that was all he could do. The wind howled softly in the distance, carrying with it whispers too faint to understand. Perhaps they were the voices of others who had come before him, lost souls wandering through Nocturna's grasp. Eldritch lifted his gaze to the empty sky. Was this eternity? A slow, meaningless march through a land that devoured all. His hands curled into fists. Nocturna would not break him. He had been many things in his lifetime. A man, a monster, an elder, but never had he been a slave. And if Nocturna believed he would bow like the others before him, he was mistaken. He was Eldritch, and he would not go quietly into the abyss. So he walked. Chapter 2. The Price of Power. Eldritch walked and walked. The desolate land stretched endlessly before him, an ocean of blackened crimson that pulsed beneath his every step. The sky remained void of stars, of a moon, of any semblance of life beyond the churning abyss of darkness above. The very air pressed against his skin, thick and oppressive, filled with whispers too faint to decipher. Then, in the distance, a figure. His heart quickened, not with hope, but with urgency. A shred of familiarity in this forsaken realm. He rushed forward, his breath heavy, though not from exhaustion. Human fragility, another cruel reminder of what he had become. As he neared, the figure came into view. A man, or what remained of one. His body was withered, his skin sagging over brittle bones. His hair, long and matted, draped over a face that had been worn by agony. His eyes, hollow and sunken, stared forward with a dull, endless emptiness. "Hello," Eldritch called, his voice breaking the unnatural stillness. The man barely reacted. Eldritch reached him, dropping to one knee, gripping his frail shoulders. "Are you all right?" The man slowly lifted his gaze, and his cracked lips parted, his voice weak and distant, barely more than a whisper. "This is our payment." Eldritch frowned. "Payment?" The man exhaled, long and slow, as if even breathing was a struggle. "To be fed upon forever." Eldritch felt the weight of those words before he even understood them. A chill ran through him, but before he could respond, the man pointed downward. Eldritch followed the motion. His stomach twisted. The black crimson beneath him was shifting, moving. The thick, parasitic substance coiled around his boots, pulsing, feeding. The land itself was drawing from him, devouring him. He stepped back instinctively, but it made no difference. The blood clung to him, tendrils wrapping around his feet like roots sinking into the ground. "The land is Nocturna," the man muttered. "It feeds as we once fed." Eldritch's hands curled into fists. This can't be the afterlife. This can't be all that there is." The man let out a hoarse, bitter laugh, though there was no joy in it. "We had our gift. Now we pay the price." His voice grew darker, as if his very essence was unravelling with each word. "An eternity of being consumed. The power we wielded in life was never ours. It was borrowed. Nocturna always takes his payment in the end." Eldritch shook his head. "No." His voice was firm, defiant. "No god rules over me." The man raised a trembling hand, pointing to the endless horizon. "Look." Eldritch followed his gaze, and what he saw sent a cold shudder through his body. The black crimson was not merely a river of liquid. It was a mass, a writhing, congealed mass of human limbs, bones and faces, some of which had long since melted into the pulsing substance, barely distinguishable, mouths frozen in silent screams, hands reaching, grasping, only to sink back into the abyss. This place was built on them, the blood of the fallen. "This is the price," the man said, his voice barely audible, "for the power we borrowed." Eldritch stared, the weight of it pressing down upon him. He had spent centuries seeking knowledge, bending the fabric of existence to his will. He had cheated death, stolen time, built a legacy upon shadows and whispers. And now he stood upon the remains of those who had come before him, those who had thought themselves eternal. A slow, creeping realization began to claw at the back of his mind. This was not an afterlife. This was a tomb built on the arrogance of those who had once called themselves gods. Eldritch kept moving, step after step. The vast, desolate expanse of Nocturna's realm stretched endlessly in all directions. Time no longer had meaning here. There was no sun and no moon, no change, only the ceaseless pull of the black-crimson mass beneath his feet, feeding upon him with each moment. His body, once powerful, was frail. His once boundless energy had been reduced to the sluggish endurance of a man. The awareness of his mortality gnawed at the edges of his mind, but he did not stop. To stop was to be consumed. Up ahead, another figure, tall, broad-shouldered, strong in stature, but already affected by this place. His steps were slow, his presence lacking the inhuman force of an elder. Eldritch called out, his voice breaking the silence. "Hello?" The man turned sharply, his expression tense. His sharp eyes studied Eldritch warily. "Where are we? I was just destroyed by a hunter, and then I appeared here." Eldritch walked up beside him. "We are in the realm of Nocturna," he said, gesturing toward the darkened sky. Then pointing down at their feet, he added, "And it seems this entire place is Nocturna." The man followed his gaze. His breath caught. The black-crimson substance had coiled around his boots, pulsing, drawing from him. "What is this?" the man rasped. "My power. It's gone. I am just a man." Eldritch exhaled slowly. "Come, we need to keep walking, or we will be consumed where we stand." The man hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Together they walked, their footsteps slow and deliberate, each one resisting the pull of the feeding land beneath them. After some time, the man finally spoke. "I should introduce myself. I am Varric." Eldritch gave a nod of acknowledgement. "How long?" Varric sighed. "Nearly 40 years as an elder." He flexed his fingers, staring at his human hands in disbelief. Becoming a man again feels helpless. Eldritch glanced at his own hands, feeling the weight of mortality settle in his bones. "I have been an elder for many centuries. I had almost forgotten what this felt like." They continued walking, conversing as they went. They spoke of their past lives, their transformations, and the nature of this realm. They spoke of the arrogance of elders, of the illusion of their power, and the finality of their fate. Then, as the endless walk stretched on, Eldritch spoke of something different. "I once had a friend," he said. "A man, just a man." Varric scoffed lightly. "You, an elder, speaking so highly of a man." Eldritch smirked faintly. "He was the most powerful being I have ever known, more powerful than the gods combined." Varric stopped in his tracks. His eyes locked onto Eldritch with sudden intensity. "A man, more powerful than the gods." Eldritch nodded. "Can he save us?" Varric asked, almost desperately. Eldritch's expression darkened. "No," he said simply. "To do so would upset the balance, something he has sworn to protect." Varric was silent for a moment. Then he chuckled, a low, amused sound. "I know this winter you speak of." Eldritch's gaze sharpened. "You do?" Varric smirked. "Yes, he stole my power once." Eldritch narrowed his eyes. "Did he?" Varric nodded. "But I understood why." His voice grew distant, as if recalling something ancient. "And I must say, even I respect him." Yeah, then suddenly, Varric stopped walking. His form began to ripple, like a mirage bending under the weight of something far greater. Eldritch took a step back as the change unfolded before him. The figure of Varric twisted, his body shifting like liquid shadow. His once human flesh became something else entirely, something vast, something ancient. The air around them thickened, the weight of his presence growing oppressive. And then, in a voice that resonated through the very fabric of this realm, he spoke. "Excuse me, Eldritch. I wanted to know you." Eldritch's jaw tightened as realization dawned. He took another step back, his muscles tensing. "Nocturna." The being smiled, a slow, knowing expression. "Ah, you figured it out. Clever, clever." Eldritch's eyes darkened. "Are you expecting me to kneel?" Nocturna let out a deep chuckle. "No, no," he said, shaking his head. "You have me all wrong, Eldritch." The shadows around him shifted, his form stabilizing into something vaguely humanoid once more. His gaze was sharp, piercing. "I am a force. I am not evil. nor am I good. I am simply what is. Eldritch remained still, unmoving. I give my power freely to you, elders, Nocturna continued, his voice carrying a strange warmth. You take it, you use it, and in return, you will feed me forever. Eldritch's expression was unreadable. He did not flinch, did not speak. Nocturna's smile widened, his presence more overwhelming than before. Now come, he said, gesturing forward. Let us walk a bit more. I would really love to chat. And so, Eldritch walked with Nocturna, the god of vampires himself. Chapter 4. The Trade of Power. You see, Eldritch, Nocturna mused as they walked across the endless blood-soaked plains. I am very much like you. I understand you and your way of thinking. His voice was smooth, rich, with an almost amused undertone. The vampire god strode beside Eldritch, as though they were nothing more than two equals engaged in conversation. But the weight of his presence was suffocating. Eldritch had spoken with kings, elders, and ancient creatures before, but never had he felt such vastness in a single being. I offer a trade, Nocturna continued. I give you power. You accept it. Wield it for as long as you can, with no restrictions, no limits. I put no time stamp on it. Use it until you burn out, until your body crumbles, until you have taken everything you can from it. And when it is finished, you pay for that power. He turned his dark, glimmering eyes towards Eldritch. After all, isn't that your code? Fair trade in all things? Eldritch's expression remained unreadable. His steps did not falter, but his voice carried a quiet defiance. Yes, but this hardly seems fair. We never knew the price. Nocturna halted suddenly, his gaze sharpening. Because you never ask. The words struck like a thunderclap. The very ground beneath them trembled. A ripple spread across the crimson-black surface, as if the realm itself reacted to its master's fury. Then, as quickly as the outburst came, it faded. Nocturna exhaled deeply, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the weight of centuries of frustration. Oh, excuse me, he muttered, shaking his head. Sometimes I get very hot-tempered. Hundreds of years of complaints, it really does wear on one's patience. He gestured for them to keep walking, his mood seemingly lightened. Now tell me, Eldritch, you knew Winter well. How is he able to wield such power as a man? His mind must be something supernatural. Eldritch did not answer immediately. He kept his gaze forward, watching the endless horizon as he walked beside a god. No, he finally said. He's just a man. He had a purpose and the will to see it through. Nocturna's brows furrowed, his amusement flickering into something darker. A man could never best me, he snapped, his voice vibrating through the air. The sky above them seemed to shift, the swirling darkness above twisting angrily. Then, as if catching himself, Nocturna exhaled and waved a dismissive hand. Oh, there I go again, that temper of mine. He chuckled, though his smile did not reach his eyes. He cast a sidelong glance at Eldritch. Do you think there is a way to take his knowledge and use it? Eldritch smirked faintly. I don't think you're powerful enough for that. Nocturna stopped walking. His expression darkened. You dare? The very air turned heavy, suffocating. The black-crimson ground beneath them slithered and pulsed, coiling like a living thing. Then Nocturna laughed, a slow, rumbling sound that was almost entertained. Oh, "Oh, so sorry. I'm not used to speaking with mortals," he said, shaking his head. "I forget how fragile you all are." Eldritch narrowed his eyes. "So let me get this straight. Your idea of a fair trade is to give a few years of power in exchange for an eternity of suffering." He scoffed. "That sounds more like theft, especially considering the buyer never even knows the price." Nocturna grinned. "You could have always said no." Eldritch let out a dry, bitter laugh. "But no one ever does." "Exactly," Nocturna beamed. "Power! Power! More power! It's all you ever ask for. You take and take and take. But when it's time to pay," he sighed dramatically, "complain, complain, complain." Eldritch didn't respond. He simply walked, and Nocturna walked beside him. They travelled deeper into the endless void, speaking of many things: morality, power, the illusion of eternity. They spoke of gods and men, of bargains and their consequences. And through it all, Eldritch listened, because for the first time he was speaking with the very thing he had spent centuries defying, the one truth that no elder had ever escaped, the force that had always been watching. Chapter 5. A different kind of prison. "I like you, Eldritch," Nocturna mused, his voice carrying across the endless abyss of Nocturna's feeding grounds. "There is something about you. Your strength, your will, your code." Eldritch scoffed. "You mean the fact that Winter was my friend, that I saw him as the most powerful being?" The smile on Nocturna's face did not waver, but the air around him did. The very realm itself trembled in response to his unspoken anger. For a long moment, Nocturna said nothing. Then, with forced lightness, he waved a hand dismissively. "Well, let's not dwell on that," he said, his voice smooth but just a shade too controlled. "I want you to think of me as your friend too. I want you to see me as I truly am, the most powerful of the gods." Eldritch narrowed his eyes, but he remained silent. Nocturna continued, gesturing around them. "I select certain powerful allies, those who prove themselves worthy, to continue their existence within my realm without being devoured. You see, Eldritch, I am not without mercy." A slow, knowing smile stretched across his face. With a simple wave of his hand, the land before them changed. The dark, parasitic expanse of blood and suffering vanished, replaced by something entirely different. A town. It was small, but lively. The land here was fresh, untouched by the horror that stretched beyond it. Greenery stretched across rolling hills. Trees with crimson leaves swayed gently in an unseen wind. The air smelled different. Clean, if such a thing could exist in a god's prison. Scattered among the streets were people, elders, or rather, those who had once been. They looked human, like Eldritch did now, their vampire bodies stripped away, yet they did not seem to be suffering. They walked freely, some laughing, some speaking in hushed voices, others simply existing in a way that was utterly foreign to the nightmare Eldritch had just endured. Nocturna's voice was calm, almost warm. "Come, Eldritch. Let us leave that other place behind. You are not meant for the feed. You are meant for greater things." Eldritch didn't move immediately. His sharp gaze flickered from Nocturna to the town before him. Skepticism etched across his face. "And what is this place, exactly?" Nocturna chuckled, stepping beside him. "This is my gift to those I choose to keep. You see, I have others, other powerful beings, once elders, whom I can return to the world should I wish. They live here, growing in strength and knowledge." His gaze darkened slightly. "Just like you, and just like Winter." Eldritch turned his head sharply at that. Nocturna grinned. I'll leave you here for now. Get used to the place. It's far better than the alternative, wouldn't you say? He gestured behind them, where the black-crimson wasteland still loomed, stretching forever into the horizon. Eldritch let out a slow breath. It was still a prison, but it was a different kind of prison. A silence hung between them for a moment before Eldritch spoke. "One last thing, Nocturna." Nocturna paused, raising an eyebrow. "You mentioned you could return elders if you wished," Eldritch said carefully. "Have you done so since winter reset reality?" For the first time, the expression on Nocturna's face changed. Hatred, pure, raw, unfiltered hatred. It was there for only a fraction of a second before his face smoothed back into neutrality. But Eldritch had seen it. Nocturna's voice, when he spoke, was calm, but the weight beneath it was dangerous. "No," he said simply. "To do so would upset the balance, and then winter would come for me." Eldritch said nothing. Nocturna smiled again, but there was something behind it now. Something hidden. Something fearful. "Enjoy your new home, Eldritch," he said. Then, with a flicker of shadow, he was gone. Eldritch turned back to the town. He took his first steps toward it, his sharp mind already working, already questioning. He had left the suffering of the endless wasteland behind. But he had walked into something else entirely, and he was sure this was only the beginning.